Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Feedback. I'm Mark Despotakis. Another show talking politics tonight. One of my favorite political guests, Dr. Tu, is here. Stay with us. Feedback starts now. Good evening and welcome to this Thursday night edition of Feedback. I'm Mark Despotakis. Lots of politics, lots and lots of politics tonight. Dr. Tu is joining us. We'll be speaking with him in just a little bit. There he is, sitting right next to me. We'll be talking to him in the upcoming segments. It's the state of education in Pennsylvania. We'll be talking about that, as well as after 9/11. He hasn't been here since well before that, and I want to kind of get his thoughts on some things having to do with 9/11, especially the media coverage. But first, in this segment, you may have seen on TV5 News a little bit earlier this evening, I had a story about the lieutenant governor, a lieutenant gubernatorial candidate, Alan Kukovich, was in town, State Senator Alan Kukovich, and we played part of my interview with him earlier. Well, now we are going to show you my complete interview with him this afternoon before he spoke to some Clarion University students. Take a look. Here in the Gemmel Student Complex at Clarion University with State Senator Alan Kukovich, also running for lieutenant governor, and that's pretty much why you're here today. You've called for, you're saying if you get in, you become the lieutenant governor, a special session on education. And talking about education, in one of your press releases you say, the quality of one's education should not be determined by the value of the homes in the community. Could you explain what you mean by that and what your plans are there?
What I mean is that we've got 501 school districts in Pennsylvania, and there's a great disparity between the amount of money spent per student in each of those districts, as great as 3 or 4 to 1. In some poorer districts, $4,000 some dollars might be spent per student per year. In some wealthy suburban districts, it could be 12, 14, 16,000. The mission of public education is to make sure that all children get a fair chance at a quality education, and that's what I mean by the quality of one's education shouldn't depend solely on the luck of where they're born. I think that defeats the whole mission of public education. Now, what we intend to do about it is to begin to focus on how the state can pick up more of the fair share of the basic educational subsidy, which once was 50% and now has dropped to 35%. And when that happens, the burden shifts to the property tax. And the property tax leads to that kind of inequity. Plus, it's also unfair to people on fixed incomes and homeowners of certain incomes and senior citizens, and that's something that needs to be changed.
You're here at Clarion University today in Clarion County, and you're going to be speaking in just a few minutes to some university students. What about higher education? We have the state system of higher education as well as other state-funded schools. Obviously, education nowadays almost always goes beyond the 12th grade and secondary ed. It goes to higher education. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, just recently I talked about how we need to have this special session, and one of the components of that session should be what to do about higher ed. Number one, we can't cut like we have or freeze the funds as we did last year, and now the governor's calling for a 3% cut. We need to realize that spending money on our colleges, our state system, is an investment, an economic investment in our communities and in our state. And every dollar that we put in, that the state puts into a college, returns almost twice that much to the community. We need to recognize that. And so I would make sure that in our future budgets, incrementally, each year we try to increase the funding to those schools a little more. Secondly, I would like to see FIA expanded.
The higher education
Yes,
assistance.
I'm sorry, yes, I hate to use acronyms like that, but it's the major vehicle that the state can use to provide loans primarily, in some instances grants, to students. Um, it'll hopefully keep tuition costs down. It'll makes colleges more available to our students. And thirdly, I think we need to start thinking at the state level in terms of moving economic development people closer to educational people, taking the various departments at the state level that deal with economic development and education, have them work together to provide grants for other types of aid to students for post-secondary training, which could be different types of vocational schools, could be for associate degree programs at community colleges and other types of schools, which have the potential not only to give a student a good base, give them a chance to earn some money, but lay the groundwork for them maybe a little bit later to move on to a school like Clarion or a four-year baccalaureate degree school, and improve their chances to advance and grow and still stay in the community. I think that's our real goal.
Last question, briefly. Every president has a vice president, and in Pennsylvania, our governor has a lieutenant governor. Any talk of running mate teaming up in any way with Rendell or Casey?
Well, there's been a lot of talk, but I'm not sure if any of that is going to happen. I've been trying to run independently, and I'm fortunate to have support of many people and organizations that support Bob Casey and many who support Ed Rendell. So I'm trying to run independently, because what I'm doing is trying to not only win an election, but win in a way that I can redefine the role of lieutenant governor, make that position more meaningful. As long as the taxpayers are going to pay for that position and that office, let's make sure it can accomplish more. And that means by having the experience to move a legislative agenda that the governor's office has through the legislature, to actually accomplish some things, to use the positions that we have with PEMA and other entities that deal with local government and land use planning and economic development, to be a very aggressive partner with local municipalities and counties and the private sector, to make sure that we have a game plan that's going to mean that we are going to grow in a very smart way, help our towns, help our cities, try to avoid destroying open space, and keeping as much of Pennsylvania clean and green as possible. And those are very active roles that I think Lieutenant Governor should play, and in the past hasn't.
And that was my conversation from earlier today with the lieutenant gubernatorial candidate, Alan Kukovich. As Dr. Tu was watching, is kind of agreeing with some of the things, and we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to get Dr. Tu's reaction to some of the things that Senator Kukovich did say about education in Pennsylvania. Stay with us. Feedback continues after the break.
On Route 322, 1 mile east of Clarion. Bull Arena offers rock and bull every Friday and Saturday night, and a game room with 8 pool tables and arcade games. Bull Arena also offers bumper bowling for kids' birthdays and league play for adults. Call 764-3471. Again, that's 764-3471.
On September 11th, America faced terrorist attacks of the worst kind. Innocent lives were lost, and a sad cloud was cast over this great nation. These acts were intended to cause fear among all Americans, including our children. But we cannot let that happen. There are things we can do to help our kids. Talk with them, listen to them, tell them they're safe and that they're loved. God bless you, and God bless America.
This portion of the programming was made possible through a grant by the Captain Loomis Hotel and Restaurant. The Captain Loomis Hotel and Restaurant is located at 540 Main Street in Clarion and offers dining as well as a nightclub. The restaurant and nightclub are open 7 days a week for your convenience. Call the Captain Loomis Hotel and Restaurant, 226-8400.
everybody, I'm Brandy. How would you like to give hope to millions of the world's children? UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, is saving lives in over 140 countries by providing kids with medicine, clean water, nutrition, and education. With your help, UNICEF can make a huge difference in our world. For more information, call 1-800-FOR-KIDS. Thank you.
You're watching TV5 with Zeta Tau Alpha.
Welcome back to Feedback. I'm Mark Despotakis. In the last segment, you saw my interview with State Senator Alan Kukovich, who's running for lieutenant governor in the state, and Dr. No2 is joining us here. And let me give a little of your credentials here. You were a professor at Clarion University, political science, and we had you on this show. Goodness, when we first started, you were one of our guests, and he's actually come back for more. I keep calling him the lieutenant governor. He's only a state senator at this point. Okay. I talked a lot about education. Wants to do a special session on education, particularly higher education. In your view, what is the state of higher education in this state right now?
I think the problem, perhaps in the short term, is the reduction of the funding by the state. For example, the 3% reduction for the coming year, it could have some bad effect. For example, it means that the universities in the state system must go out to raise more funds, and it would take away so much time of the presidents of these institutions in order to go out and solicit funds. And so I don't know whether that is a good thing. Private universities, yes, they do have to search for a lot of money, but we somehow have the primary objective of not raising the tuition fees too much, because that would defeat the purpose of the state system. So somewhere along the line, I think that the state might like to look carefully and fund the system in such a way that the presidents would not have to run around asking for money too much, or the students would not have to contribute in terms of tuition fees. And I think somewhere along the line there could be some compromises to reach that objective.
Well, how does that come to the forefront? Everyone wants money from this. I mean, if you look at how do you make education come to the forefront?
I think that in the last few years, there was the tendency in the United States in general to attack the educational establishment. Too much money, not big results, all that kind of thing. And so from the lower level at the elementary school, high school, and probably would spill into the state system, not only in Pennsylvania, but elsewhere as well. And everybody would demand that you show me the results. Mm-hmm. So I think that, of course, there ought to be accountability, but sometimes it does take a lot of time for education to show the results.
Right.
You cannot have something just like producing something and there you have the product. For example, how long does it take you now to become such a professional person in taking care of these programs right here? It does take some time, right? And so this is why politicians particularly would like to get into the forefront of the attack that would make it popular. We pay taxes, we demand the results, we must see the immediate results and that sort of thing. And sometimes it leads to the idea that, hey, the taxpayers should jump on the bandwagon and demand that cut back, cut back, cut back.
Right.
And right now, I tell you, if we cut back, we'll be losing so much to foreign countries where they push tremendously for education.
Right. the University Foundation just bought some property down the street, and they're going to use it for housing in the coming years. And in talking to Dr. Reinhardt about that, one thing she said was, I mean, the foundation's doing this, so that's essentially a private entity doing it. It's not the university, and then hence not the state paying for it. And she says our new state system chancellor, Dr. Judy Hampel, after talking to legislators, is now encouraging universities to seek more private-public partnerships like building this housing. Is that the way that we should be moving for a state institution? I just think it's odd. Aren't we moving now toward we're becoming a private institution if we do that?
Well, let me tell you this story. Several years back, I subscribed to the French magazine L'Express, and it described the situation at Yale University, how in the future Yale would build dormitories that would attract students. In other words, the main thrust of the article was that in the US, many great universities would like to attract students, and the best way to do so is not only to provide a tremendously strong academic environment, but also a great deal of comfortable living. And I guess from that moment, you could see that all around the nation, universities competed with each other in order to attract the students. And so I guess somewhere along the line, if we don't attract students by giving them comfortable living quarters, they might like to go to IUP, for example. And so this is the game that every university is playing. And in fact, sometimes it could be terrible in the sense that where should we draw the line?
Well, that's the question, I think, that
yes.
We all need to answer. We're going to go ahead and take a break. Although we could probably talk about this subject for half an hour. I do want to get your thoughts on 9/11 and things that happened with that. So we're going to go ahead and take a break right now, and we are especially going to talk about the media and how they have covered September 11th in this country. Stay with us. Feedback continues after the break.
This portion of the programming was made possible through a grant by Fox's Pizza Den. Fox's Pizza Den is located on Old Route 66 in Clarion and offers all-day delivery. Phone 226-5555. That's 226-5555. Fox's Pizza Den is open 7 days a week for your convenience. Phone 226-5555.
Hi everybody, I'm Brandy. How would you like to give hope to millions of the world's children? UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, is saving lives in over 140 countries by providing kids with medicine, clean water, nutrition, and education. With your help, UNICEF can make a huge difference in our world. For more information, call 1-800-FOR-KIDS. Thank you.
To do that. Well, to feedback. We are talking with Dr. No Tu, a political science professor here at Clarion University. He has since retired, but I like to have him on every once in a while to pick his brain because he's so much fun to have here. We haven't talked, at least on the air, since September 11th happened. I know we talked at College Media Day very briefly, but I want to talk a little bit about media coverage of it. Everyone, I mean, not even necessarily September 11th, but in the aftermath. This has really revolutionized news. It has revolutionized the news business, and it has revolutionized it for students going into the news business. Certainly, it changed my world and how I cover things. How has the business done, in your opinion, since then? What have you thought?
I think that basically the news media have been doing a very great job, particularly in the immediate aftermath of the terrorist attacks. They even sacrificed the money in terms of the commercials in order to give to the citizens the straight facts. And that was really unprecedented in many ways. But on the whole, I think moved by tremendous patriotism, they would like to step back and let the executive branch carry out the task. No criticism, nothing in quite a long time, you see. And I think that it was amazing that during this time I follow the trend very carefully, and I discern two kinds of things in the media. One is the opinion makers, I call them that way because they are the columnists. They are really the advocates of this and that. In fact, they were criticizing President Bush for being very slow in reacting. And then when we started the bombing, they criticized the bombing as not powerful enough, and they criticized the commitment of troops as too little, and so on and so forth. So these columnists, not all of them, but a segment of them, was very powerful in pushing for this. In fact, President Bush probably was unhappy because the Weekly Standard, the conservative weekly magazine, was the one that really was pushing for a lot of measures ahead of President Bush. And meanwhile, the news media was somewhat reluctant to jump in to criticize anything, because I guess we have in the United States the basic idea that when we have a crisis of this sort, everybody should be behind the president, whoever that might be. And in fact, they did a wonderful job in that. But as the war went on, I noticed that things started to go back to the regular way. In other words, the news media begin to assert itself again, because here the main function of the free press is at least to remind the people in power that there ought to be certain accountability, there ought to be certain questions that should be raised. And so you noticed the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, they had people right on the front in Afghanistan, and they were the first to point out the mistakes during an attack where we killed some 17 people and arrested 27 or so. So they were the first to point out that that was the mistake. And I think that gradually from this area, as the war somewhat slowed down, because we succeeded tremendously well, so as the war started to slow down, the media focused on other issues. And one related issue, of course, was how much of a commitment can we make overseas? We have troops in the Philippines. Now we have in Yemen, we have in Georgia. And pretty soon we might have in other places. And so they do raise the question about the commitment, about the resources, because it costs money. You see, the Philippines already, we gave 100 million. In Georgia, we gave $50 million. And God knows, somebody, if, let's say, a government of a country X, if it could tie something in the country to Al-Qaeda in a most tenuous way, they can claim money from us. They say, we are part of your ball game, so give us some money. So this is where the press is coming in to raise some questions. And it is legitimate.
Right.
At the same time, I think in the White House, there is a degree of, I don't know whether secretive behavior or maybe arrogance, because we succeeded so well on the battlefield. But for example, the issue of Mr. Cheney, the vice president, refusing to divulge information that had to do with the executive of Enron having something to do with an input in the energy policy. At the same time, remember Governor Rich of Pennsylvania? He was asked to come before the Appropriations Committee of the Senate. And the White House said, oh no, we are not going to let him come because he is a part of the advisory function of the White House, and he's not a member like a cabinet member, so he doesn't have to answer. So all of this, I guess, irritated not only Democrats but Republicans in the House and the Senate, and this is where the media could find a very significant area to raise tremendous questions.
We are out of time with you. I mean, there's so many things we could talk about, but Dr. Tu, thank you for coming down.
Thank you.
We are going to take a break and come back to wrap things up after this.
Okay.
I'll take Simmons.
Yeah. Give me Jones.
Anderson.
Smith.
Lightfoot.
Bishop.
Hernandez.
Swifka.
Harris.
Lavender.
Peavy.
Yes.
In the game of life, you've got a much better chance at getting picked for a cool job with great pay if you take algebra, geometry, and calculus. You need to know how math can improve your future. Demand it. Call NACME. We'll tell you.
This portion of programming is sponsored by Reese Brothers, located in Drake Square Building in Oil City. Reese Brothers offers a competitive hourly wage, plus daily bonuses, flexible scheduling, company-sponsored health benefits, and paid professional training. Call today at 1-800-365-3500, extension 684, or 677-9236 for your personal interview, or stop by and visit the Drake Square Building. Reese Brothers, where integrity and technology connect.
On September 11th, America faced terrorist attacks of the worst kind. Innocent lives were lost, and a sad cloud was cast over this great nation. These acts were intended to cause fear among all Americans, including our children. But we cannot let that happen. There are things we can do to help our kids. Talk with them, listen to them, tell them they're safe and that they're loved. God bless you, and God bless America.
Once again, want to thank Dr. No Tu for joining us. Also, thanks to State Senator Alan Kukovich for the interview with him earlier today. That's all the time we have for tonight. We'll see you next week on Feedback. Have a good weekend.